Nation. Join us now for Family Mix Mondays with licensed professional counselor Jaketra Bryant. Tune in as Jaketra shows the different dynamics that make up family. Whether you represent the nuclear family, single parent, extended, grandparent, or blended family, Jaketra has tips and advice designed to strengthen your family structure. Source Nation, here is your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Good evening, Source Nation. I am your host, Jaketra Bryant, and I want to welcome you to Family Mix Mondays, which is a show where I will discuss breaking the cycles and building back up our families on intentional parenting, how to stop being a guest in your home, communication, and many more topics to mix it in. So join me each Monday right here at Source Nation as I discuss more topics. But this Monday is our start of a new series, actually. We are starting a series of how parent involvement affects your students' achievement. And so tonight's special guest is Jeermal Sylvester, and he's going to shine some light from his perspective as a life coach. And so before we jump into all that, let me stop for a moment and just stop to thank our sponsors, and they are WGLRO.com, Scott Cares Foundation, Cyber Grandstand Digital, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Blend to Blend Juice Bar Boutique, Renovations, and New Covenant of Praise Worship Center. And so once we get back after the break, we'll have Jeermal Sylvester, and he and I are going to kick off this awesome new series of how parent involvement affects your student achievement. So stay tuned.
Source Nation, stay tuned. You're listening live to Family Mix Mondays with your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Source Radio Network is just one of the many platforms that is used to fulfill dreams of our listeners and create a purpose that will impact the lives of our communities, cities, and the world. It is often said that great things will happen when a group of driven people work together to accomplish one goal. We're giving people the opportunity to have a voice, translate words that haven't been heard, and paint pictures that no one has seen. Source Radio Network is fueling your life's purpose. How can you listen? www.blogtalkradio.com/Source Radio.
Welcome back, Source Nation. You're listening live to Family Mix Mondays with your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Welcome back, Source Nation. I'm your host, Jaketra Bryant. And as stated before the break, we have Jeermal Sylvester in the studio with me tonight to kick off our series of how parent involvement affects our student achievement. But before he joins us, let me read a little bit about him. So Jeermal Sylvester, life coach, certified youth specialist, is also a consultant and a voice for the young people. He is originally from Chicago, Illinois, and graduated from South Bend Riley High School, where he later continued to play ball with Metro Player and became Metro Player of the Year, and later went on to play professional overseas basketball. His work continued to go with working with a career in social services with youth that were misunderstood and disengaged. He continues to have experience with high risk, working with youth as a youth specialist, and also serves on the board for My Brother's Keeper and Evolve and Heroes Camp. And his work just continues to extend with Marion County and other committees within St. Joseph. And I do believe we have Mr. Jeermal in the studio. So hello, how are you? Welcome to Family Mix Mondays. Thank you so much for being here.
Man, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, again, welcome to Family Mix Monday. Why don't you tell the Source Nation a little bit more about what you're doing, what projects you're currently working on before we jump into our discussion?
All right. Like Jaketra said, I'm originally from Chicago, moved to South Bend, Indiana. Started playing basketball. That's when things began to change for me. Up until that point, I was living in a single-parent home. My father went to the penitentiary when I was young. And so I was living with moms and trying to figure this thing called life out. Fell in love with basketball. It began to create some opportunities for me. I was able to go to Ball State, play basketball. I was all conference my last 2 years at Ball State. Then that led to me getting some opportunities to play professional basketball overseas in Argentina, Singapore, and in France. I had a career-ending knee injury, and then that's when life changed for me once again. When I broke my kneecap, I was sitting at home, and I had to do some soul searching, and I had to find a job. But up until that point, my only job and my only concern was basketball. So I put all my eggs in the NBA basket. And when they all cracked, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I had to do some soul searching and find out, who I was without a basketball and find out what it is that I loved. And what I found was that I love working with children, especially children who suffer from some of the same things that I dealt with, fatherlessness, gang violence, drugs, all of those different things that a lot of our young people are suffering from in our different communities. And so that's my mission. That's my goal. I go around to various organizations when asked to kind of tell my story, to kind of show our young people that, yes, life is hard, but you can do it. But it's all based on taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented before you and making sure that you keep yourself insulated and covered with supportive people, whether that's mom, dad, a coach, a pastor, aunt, uncle, anybody that's willing to invest in you, to take advantage of those people and not use them but utilize them to help you get to your next.
Yeah, that's a great journey, and I definitely have some questions for you later on about that and just that push into how we can help our parents. So I am kicking off this series called How Parent Involvement Affects Student Achievement. And so I know you have some great insight to offer our parents. And so my whole motto is not that I'm going to bash our parents, but I want to give them the realest version that I can that shows some of the negative side when they take their hands off, but also help them with the resources with putting their hands back on and some of the benefits that come with it. So thank you again for just even being on the show to start this series. And so I know you have so much to offer. And so, Source Nation, if you are just tuning in, you are listening to my special guest tonight, Mr. Jeermal Sylvester, and he is a life coach, certified youth specialist. And we're kicking off our series of how parent involvement affects student achievement. If you want to talk to him tonight and ask him some questions or ask me any questions, the number to dial in is 619-924-0933 and press option 1, 619-924-0933 and press option 1. So we're going to go ahead and jump in our discussion so that our parents who are just really just amped up about hearing this topic can really take some great notes. So what do you think are some common reasons that parents are not involved with our youth that you've seen through your years of experience?
There's a multitude of reasons, and as I continue to work in this field, I change every day, and I look at things differently. And I think that a lot of it is if you had a bad experience yourself as a parent in school, that kind of helps keep a lot of our parents away from the school. Some of our parents are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome from their experiences in the classroom because they've either dealt with teachers that didn't understand, or they've dealt with administrators who didn't understand, or who didn't try to take the time to find out what was really going on with them. I'm also trained as a master trainer in adverse childhood experiences, and until I went to that training, I never really understood the importance of the things that you go through as a child and how they impact your life. And so I think that a lot of our parents have just had some bad run-ins in school, and so that kind of keeps them from building that good parent-teacher relationship or that good parent-administrator relationship because of some of the things that they had to experience when they were young.
I agree. And, so I'm a licensed clinician. As a licensed clinician, I unfortunately get to hear so many of the other ends. So I get to hear from the clients and from my students who are now, I don't want to call them victims, but they're now products of the hurt or the trauma that their families have experienced, and it's so real. So I think, that's some excellent points that you made about, some of our parents, they have some type of PTSD, if you will, with just the experiences they've had at school or going into those classrooms or just growing up, and how it actually does play a role onto their parenting.
Yeah, that's true. And also I think that, and I don't know where this came from or how this came about, but I think that as we as children begin to get older, I don't know why, but I think some parents think that means that as they get older, it's less parental involvement. And that's not true, because as we get older, that means we begin to think more broader, and so we need even more supervision as our minds grow to kind of keep the reins on us, because we can lose control and we can get out of order and get out of pocket. And if I'm 6, 7, and 17, it's kind of hard for mom to tell me something now, but have mom stayed, in that process and been in my corner and, at those parent-teacher conferences and being a part of the PA meetings to kind of know what's going on, not just with me, but what's going on with the school and what those expectations are, and how, as parents, we can help at home, because a lot of what's going on it's not what's going on at school, it's what's not going on at home. And so the more that we can be in our children's lives, and I get it, some of our parents may have left school, early because of choices or decisions, and they had to go get a job and work. That doesn't mean that they don't care about education. It just means that they had to take care of the bills and put those things first. And a lot of parents get discouraged because the work looks so hard that they can't do it. But we have so many resources online that they can tap into. Google is my best friend. And so they can Google and they can use those free online resources to kind of help, not only help their kids, but they can also take some of those tools and use them for themselves to kind of help educate themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And so I hope that, some of our parents really are intentional. And so, I love doing series about just being intentional about the things that you do and intentional about your parenting. And a lot of that goes into play. Being intentional about the words that come out of your mouth, being intentional about your relationship that you have with your children, being intentional about your involvement within the school system, all of it, so that you can have that well-rounded kid, you can have that open relationship. So if something is going down, then child feels comfortable enough to even open up and come to you. And all those things have, such big factors with it. And so I know, with your years and years of experience, I was wondering, if you've heard some particular stories or one stands out in your mind that you've heard probably from one of your youth when the parent has their hands off of it, when the parent is not as involved, a story that stands out to you.
Well, I have a number of them. I had the privilege of working, and I don't want to say that or take it lightly, but I worked in the Department of Corrections here in Indiana for a total of 14 and a half years, 10 years with juveniles, and then 4.5 years with adults. And I think that to a man and to a woman, I think that a lot of our young people that didn't have that parental involvement kind of fell victim to their own devices because to them they felt like no one cared. And if I go to school and I feel like my teachers don't care, and then I come home and the people who created me, they're not even catering to me or concerned about what's going on with me. I'm going to go find that somewhere. And so everybody wants to be a part of something, and so that's how our kids kind of get set astray. That parental involvement is so key. We got our parents who are involved with our kids in athletics, and they're at every practice, they're at every event. They make sure that those students or those athletes got the newest shoes, they got the Kevin Durant's, they got the Steph Curry, they got the LeBrons. But it's not that same type of support, and it's not everybody, but I tend to see that a lot of parents will jump on the athletic bandwagon, and we don't promote that in our community and in our schools as far as on the academic side. We don't have that same investment on the academic side of it. And so we give out huge trophies and we give out all of these great things for our athletes who excel, and don't get me wrong, because I was an athlete, I understand and I get it, but we also need to put our kids who are academically inclined, we need to also glorify them and put them up on a pedestal, because we know that education is important. For me, I settled. I could have been an AB student, but I allowed my coaches and I allowed other adults to allow me to settle to be a C student, because they told me all I had to do was get a C, and I was eligible to play. So all I had to do was keep a C average. And C is average. And I was a great player, and I should have been able to transfer that into my academics, because it takes great discipline. It takes, teamwork. It takes so many different things in order to be a part of a team, and then also to be a good player. Those same things should have been my same attributes in the classroom, but because no one was telling me, hey, go get an A, you should be the best student in your class, I settled to be an average student, and I put everything into my athletics. And then when the athletic side didn't pan out, I had to fall back on my academics, and now I'm looking for a job, and employers are looking at my college transcripts, and my college transcripts is not a reflection of who I am as a person, because I just did enough to get by. Had I known then what I know now, I would have been an A or B student through high school and through college, because it was my resume, and my grades preceded me in some of my job opportunities, and some employers turned me down because they looked at my transcript, 4 years of just average grades. And you're talking about multi-million-dollar companies. They're making an investment, and so they had to make the right investment. And while I was bitter, I understand now.
Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to make a turnaround into this, but it does sound like the journey have its experiences in it. And with that being said, I was wondering, were you taking that particular journey that you had with being turned down and being this I guess average student, if you will, and having these particular challenges growing up? So channeling all that into being this now life coach and certified youth specialist, while working with your youth, what has been some of their achievements that you've seen them do academically and socially since your involvement with them?
I think the number one thing is we got to get back to accountability and being responsible. And so a lot of times, because a father is not in the child's life, or they come from a low socioeconomic background, or whatever other barriers there could be, we tend to try to not hold kids accountable for some of their actions or some of the things that they do. And I think that's where we do them a disservice. I think accountability is everything, and if you can instill accountability and responsibility in our kids at a young age, I think they'll have more chances of being successful. And that's what I try to do. I don't try to be their friend, because that's not what I'm called to do. What I am called to do is be a mentor, be a coach, be a father figure, be a role model. And so that comes with holding them accountable, but also with holding myself accountable. And so I never ask my kids to do something that I wouldn't do. And so I'm in it with them, and I'm in the trenches with them, and I always tell my kids, you quit before I quit, because I know that I'm in the position that I'm in because somebody stood in the gap, and I didn't always do it right. And I know I frustrated a lot of people, but those people that truly love me, they stood with me, and they made me be accountable, and they held me accountable, and they held me to a higher standard. And I think that if we raise our expectations for our kids will raise their expectations for themselves.
That's a really good point. It really is. I think, I love the word accountability. That is one of my core values. And so I think oftentimes that we don't hold other people accountable, and nor do we stop to turn our mirror on ourselves to be accountable for our actions and how they actually do impact other people and what becomes next in our lives. And so it really sounds as one of the things that you're saying is you began to make sure those kids held themselves accountable so they can actually have that achievement academically and that achievement in that social piece. So do you have your hands on them inside the classroom some, or is it mainly just kind of outside in the community settings?
It used to be in the classroom when I worked for Jobs for America's Graduates, but it's in a different space now. Sometimes it may be in the classroom or it may be facilitating a workshop, but most of it's just outreach because our young people are hurting. That blank look that you see in a lot of their faces, it's not a look of hopelessness. It's a look of letdown. Our children are waking up prepared to be let down. And I have a problem with that. And I try to teach them that they should have a problem with that because any adult that comes into their lives should be responsible enough and be accountable enough to them, even if you didn't do it right. You need to be able to show them the right way to do it because our young people, they're our future, they're our greatest resource, and we have to invest in them in a greater way. And so that's what I try to do. And that's, if that means showing up at a basketball game, if that means going to a parent-teacher conference, if that means showing up at a probation hearing or at court, any of those things, I've extended myself and put myself out there to be available to our young people because I know the importance of having somebody to let down. My life didn't change until I got somebody in my life that I knew that I could let down, and I didn't want to see that look in their face. And so I began to change. And so we have to, do those types of things and really wrap our arms around our young people and give them the resources that they need to be successful.
Yeah, and it's all about resources. It's all about time. It's all about your presence there, and it's all about what's happening in your presence while it's there. And so, but we all know that one area, whatever's going on in your home does affect your outside. So even though you have that outreach portion and you have your hands more on that social piece and just kind of grabbing them even where they are, we all know that if that wasn't there, then those other pieces will even in turn be affected in the classroom. And what goes on in the home does actually indeed affect what goes on outside in the classroom, as well as how they are socially, how they are in different environments and things like that. So it all matters, and we honestly play a part into a person's success or failure, actually.
That is true, and I think the one thing that we always got to remember, we can have a great expectation for somebody, whether that's a parent or a student, but when our expectations far exceed what they know, then they'll always be a failure in our eyes or in society eyes because of these great expectations. And a lot of times I'm learning that some people just don't know. And when you haven't been parented, to ask somebody to take care of a kid, and I know we make those adult decisions to lay down and have sex, unprotected sex, and have children, but a lot of us, kids don't come with instructions. And so when you don't know what to do, when you don't barely get along the street and you can barely take care of yourself, but to have a mouth and a life that you have before you and you don't even know how to take care of yourself, that can become overwhelming and scary. And that's why a lot of fathers run, because when you don't know what to do, you either fight or you run. And so they run, and they run not because they don't want to be there. They run because they don't have the resources to give them what they didn't get when they were growing up. And so they feel like the child is better off if they're not there. And that's not true because you can buy them clothes and you can buy them shoes, and all of those things are going to get little. They're going to outgrow them. It's the time. And so we have to begin to put an emphasis and the importance on time spent. And that's whether you're in the house or whether you and the mother are not together. You still need to find a way to spend time with your children and let them know that you love them and that you believe in them, and just invest in them and the things that they like to do.
Yep, time. I love that word. So I love your accountability word. Love it. And I love time, because you're right. All these factors they make a difference. And the sad part about it is the story of a lot of our young men, our young girls' lives are that it may be a single-parent home from whatever circumstances, or it might be that parent is working. And so time does make a difference. I remember I have a little 9-year-old kid, so I talk about him all the time, every show. So I remember my 9-year-old, he loves renting Redbox movies. And so I usually rent them for him, and then I'll start washing dishes and cooking him something, and then I'll go upstairs and watch my shows. And one particular evening, I remember he was like, "Mom, are you going to watch this with me?" And I was like, "Oh, wait." And so he was like, I really just want you to watch this movie with me. And I realized there that I was like, oh, wait, I'm doing half this busy work really for myself, because all he really wants me to do is sit next to him and spend some time with him and just watch this kid movie. And I realized from there that those little things really, really made a difference for him.
And all it is affirmation. We all want to know that somebody sees us. It's hard walking through life when you feel like you're invisible and nobody sees you. Even with all of the stuff going on, and you just think about some of our young children that go to school, and the kid could have been up all night because the mom's boyfriend was beating on the mom, or just, any of those things that go on in some of our communities. And the first thing that the teacher says is, get out of my class. No one ever asks that young person, well, what happened to you? It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And until we get to that place where we can begin to sit down and talk with our young people to find out what happened to them, because a lot of what's going on with them and a lot of how they're acting out is because of something that was done to them, and they didn't know how to respond to it, or they couldn't respond to it because they didn't have the tools to respond to it. I'm 5 years old. What am I to do with a grown man jumping on my mom? How do I deal with that? And then you want me to come to school and you want me to focus on math and English? Are you serious? I'm talking about this life stuff. We got a number of our kids who at 2:45, they're looking at the clock. While some kids are looking at the clock and they can't wait to get home, a lot of our kids are looking at the clock wishing they can start it all over again, because school is a safe place for them.
And that's the reality, but that's a sad reality. Very, very sad. So it shows, like kind of back to my theory, whether what you do really makes a difference with just like your student and their success or failure. So if your hands are off or if your hands are on, and how your hands look when they're on makes a big difference as to how successful or how much of a struggle your children will actually have. And that's the sad part. And it just really shows how we as people really impact one another by everything that we do in life. I had to just fuss at my son this morning about not getting faster so that he can take out the dog. And so I have this big life lesson. So my son gets lots of life lessons. That's a therapist in me. So he had this big life lesson about how what he did just impacted me and as well as the dog. So now the dog's punished. The dog couldn't go for a walk. And the dog's mad because he has to be put up all these different hours while I'm at the office. And so I had to let my son know how his role just impacted. And I gave him a basic example. I was like, what happens if I decide not to go grocery shopping? And he was like, no. I was like, well, you don't eat. And I was like, so what I do now impacts you. And then from there, you keep going on. So now you can't go to school because if you go to school, now you're hungry and you're distracted, and all these factors matter because I decided that I didn't want to get groceries or I couldn't get them. And I was like, so that means that everything that I do is going to impact you just like everything you do is going to impact the people around you. And that's like the reality, unfortunately, of what happens. And so our parents, hands off or hands on, however it looks, affects our children and what happens next with them. And so I wanted to shift it a little bit, but not kind of really. What do you think it is that our parents are actually missing out on when they are absent from having their hands into the academic pool or coming to those social organizations like those basketball games and those football games and chess and stuff like that, or actually taking into school organizations? What do you think are some things our parents miss out on when it comes to our youth?
Well, the number one thing is you miss out on all the greatness and the potential in your child when you don't show up. And so somebody else get to experience that, whether that's a teacher or whether that's a coach. Somebody is going to embellish in that glory, and it should be you. But because you're not hands-on, you miss out on some of those things. And so I think that our parents need to, and I know that a lot of them think that it's pride, but I think it's a false sense of pride where we don't want to take advice from other parents. And so for me, with my children, I hung around other guys who had kids who I thought were great fathers because I didn't know what I was doing. It was on-the-job training for me, and so you have to associate yourself with the thing that you want. Aristotle said that we are what we repeatedly do. And so if we continue to not be there and not have our hands on or be negative or not show up, those things are going to come out, and it's going to come out in our children, and it's going to look ugly, and it's only a reflection of us. And so we have to be willing to go to those workshops, show up to those PTA meetings, go up to the school, and not go up to the school with your rollers in your hair or with your pajamas on, or for the dads smelling like weed or any of those things. Going up there and representing yourself and representing your child in such a way that the school takes you serious. Because a lot of times after about 2 or 3 letters home and no response, then the school take it into their own hands, and then they stop sending letters, and now your kid is subject to whatever the social worker or whatever the psychiatrist or psychologist that's on deck, they're subjected to whatever they think is wrong. And I worked in a mental health institution, and I watched so many of our kids get misdiagnosed with LD, and there was nothing wrong with the kid. The kid, was he bad? Yeah, but the reality was he was reacting and responding to a situation that had previously happened to him, and he acted out in school, and they diagnosed that as a learning disability. And so a lot of our kids are being misdiagnosed, they're being mislabeled, and all of that is because our parents are not involved. And you have to be involved, and if you don't know, find somebody that do know. Use Google. Ask questions. Let them know that, hey, I'm not just going for this. And sometimes I think that our parents just go for whatever the school says just because it's the school. And the school is not always right. And so you have to be able to stand and support your child because your child is watching. And if you're not supporting your child, that's another downer for a kid. Well, my mom don't even come to my parent-teacher conference. They in here talking crazy to me. I don't got nobody in here to support me. And so we have to begin to do those things and take advantage of the resources and the free workshops that are being offered on parenting.
That's an excellent point that you made, and I had so many thoughts going through my head with that, with scenarios and just my experience. And the unfortunate thing is, like, it's actually across the board. Like, I have my son in private schools, and I was highly surprised to find the absence of parents being very high there. Because my thought process was, I'm paying my money, and this ain't a cheap amount. Per month, like everything costs money there, from the lunch to the after, everything. Like a pencil is not even free. Everything costs money. So I was very surprised of the lack of involvement with those. And if you did get parents, you got the same set of like 4 kids parents, and that was really sad because you're right. So what I did notice is just like you said. So many people being mislabeled, so many people like having these negative behavior reports or academic reports, and all those things happening. And then here you have like parents just receiving the diagnosis from a teacher's like observation when there are so many factors, when it really needed to be the parents having their hands on a lot more, having more education about it, or like you said, go and Googling something or asking someone that's in that professional field to really take a thorough assessment so that the person can properly get the services in which they need. Because sometimes it's as basic as just like my son, sitting down and watching a movie with him.
And I went through it personally. So me working in the mental health field, I understand the terminology. I understand the psychotropic medications and all of those things. And so with my son, he was in elementary school, and this elementary school, this teacher just kept picking on him, and they kept sending letters home. And my son is very bright. He's very artsy and articulate, but he was the biggest kid in the class. And so this teacher just kept picking, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take a day off from work. And so I took off from work, and I said, I'm going to come up to the classroom, but I'm not going to let the teacher know that I'm coming up there. And it was the old classrooms where you had the coat closet that joined the classrooms. And so I just observed. I asked the principal, was it okay? And I observed from the other classroom, and I just watched. And then I came around after everything was over with, and I came in class, and the first thing she said was, did you see Jaden? Did you see what he did? And I'm like, yeah. I said, I saw him. But I said, did you see the young lady punch the little boy in the back? And did you see this boy kick this boy? And she said, no. I said, how could you if you were focused on my son? And so I immediately removed him from that school. I put him in another school. And in this school, on day one, the teacher told him, she read through his report, she seen that he was achieving off the charts academically, and she told him, she said, look here, buddy. And she was so intentional that I thought she was talking to me. And I was like, huh? And she told my son, look, I know that you can do this, and I'm going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to ensure that you do everything that you're supposed to do. My son went from being labeled and they tried to diagnose him to get him on medication to being on straight honor roll for the next 4 years in a row. And I'm like, all of that was because of parental involvement. They weren't used to a mother and a father showing up at a parent-teacher conference and then a father understanding that terminology. And so I was able to speak to it intelligently, and they ended the meeting because I knew what I was talking about. I'm like, y'all not going to mislabel my son. I work in that space, and a lot of the kids that I have in my facility right now shouldn't even be here, but because they didn't have a parent or some adult person stand up for them and for their rights, they were mislabeled and they were put in bad environments. And you know how it goes because you're a therapist. The longer they stay in that and stay underneath that label, the more they begin to believe it, and then they begin to act on it.
It's so unfortunate. So, Source Nation, I also wanted to just remind you that we're talking to Mr. Jeermal Sylvester, and he is our youth specialist life coach. And if you want to call in to ask him any questions, the number dialing is 619-924-0933 and press option 1. I'm sure he'll have some great answers just for you. Jeermal, I completely agree with all of that. Unfortunately, I've seen so much of it. My background is so extensive, with so much from jail systems, prisons, to community-based, to now university settings and having my own business. And I've seen so much of it. And you can't help but to stop pointing fingers at one side and everybody gets a finger, because it really makes a difference as to what happens. And you see it different, and you see teachers respond when you have your parents present, because they will quickly label you. Like, I don't let anybody off the hook. They will quickly label you. Like, I'm like, well, if you weren't there, you're at fault. And you said something earlier that brought back something when I was listening to the sermon by Ryan Carpenter. One of my friends, she told me about it. And the sermon was actually about, like, what is a man? So it had nothing to even do about children, but the point in it grabbed me so much. And he talked about, like, the positioning of a man and his wife. And he said that if my wife is broken or something is going on with her, then I need to look at me. Because what happens with her is a reflection of what's going on with me and what I'm giving her. And I was like, ooh, that's good, so good. And it just really stuck to me, because I was like, you're absolutely right. So everything that I do reflects what happens with my son's day and what goes on with him and what he's going to now give out. And if there is some healing that needs to take place in my life, or there is some brokenness or lack of education, all that is going to be reflected. So everything you see in your children is a reflection of what you're giving them. And so it was so good. I was like, oh, my goodness, this sermon was so good.
Well, I think, too, in order to have effective parent involvement, it has to be a true partnership that exists between the school and the family. And we need to understand what the definition of parental involvement is. It's a combination of commitment and active participation on the part of the parent to the school and to the student. So that means I need to know what's going on at school so that I can make sure that the same things are going on at home. It's hard if you don't know what's going on in school to have an expectation for your child when they come home. And so my son hates it. I take screenshots. If I got it set up where I get emails, and the moment I get a bad grade, I'm emailing and texting him saying, yo, what's up with this? This is a problem, and you need to get on this, and this need to be right by the time you get home. You need to have an answer for me on why this is like this. And so it's being that committed, calling up to the school, getting to know the teachers. I'm not saying you got to be their best friends, but you need to know them. You need to be on speaking terms with them if you want what's best for your child.
Yeah, it's so much that goes into like making sure they're successful, and it's not like the saying we're needing to build up straight A students or kids who are going to get scholarships, but just like the holistic approach. Like you want them to be well-rounded socially, you want them to be well-rounded like academically, you want them to feel a part of, you want them to be healthy with their boundaries, how they make friendships, like all those things like really, really make a difference. And so like I wanted to come back because I was listening to like just your story that you've been given and this awesome journey that you have overcome and have turned into success. And I was wondering, like, what was it about your personal journey that caused you to want better for yourself?
For me, it was the things that I had to endure because of my parents' decisions that forced me and was my driving force. I vowed I would never be like my father, and I would never do the things that my parents did to me, to my children. And so that was always my driving force. And while it was more anger, I utilized it to help me be successful in sports, and I used that anger and that sheer willpower to be better than those that went before me. And so while my dad wasn't there, he was my best teacher because he taught me how not to do it. And so I vowed to my son he would never go to bed or wake up without me in his life. And I've kept my promise to that, and with my daughters as well. And so it's just, having that good old-fashioned willpower and just making a stance. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I know that, if I wanted to change my surroundings and change what was going on with me, I had to change on how I was looking at things and change the way that I looked at life and the way that I looked at how to get things in life. And so I just began to, baby step, one step at a time until I got to a place of comfortability. The thing that I want to really get across is remember when you were young and whenever your mom or dad was around, when you were riding your bike or you were doing anything, you always wanted them to look at me, or that was what we always said, look at me, look at me. You think about how quickly you stop saying, look at me, if you had those parents who, when you said that, they didn't come look at you, and how it went from that's all you said to you don't even ask them to look at you anymore because you don't even expect it. And I think that's where a lot of our young kids have gotten to. It's like, man, I used to want you to look at me. Now I don't even care because I see that you don't care. Because I remember when I got straight A's in school and I came home and I got nothing. And I remember when I got straight F's and I came home and I got the same exact thing. So why? Why go to school and get good grades? If don't nobody care, why should I care?
That's good. That's good. So, Jeermal, we have a caller in the queue, actually. Caller with the last four digits of 6139. You are live with Jeermal Sylvester. Do you have a question or a comment? All right. So if they happen to chime back in, we'll definitely let them have an opportunity to ask you a question or a comment. So I think it's really, really, really good. Like, so I'm just thoroughly impressed by you and just who you became in spite of those particular obstacles. And so I'm glad you're able to shine some positive light on just like, here I am coming from this negative place, unfortunately, but was able to climb up and just recognize that what hands off and what hands on did for you. So I was wondering, did you have particular people that mentored you or teachers who actually saw more in you that played a role into making sure this achievement happened?
Yes, I did. I was just about to chime in and speak on that, because I don't want anyone to think that I did this all by myself, because it's impossible to do it by yourself. First off, it's by the grace of God. And then secondly, as I got older and I began to make, even in my teenage years, some adult decisions that caused me some heartache, God began to place different men and women in my lives. And I'm glad that he gave me an ear to hear and eyes to see who those people were. And I allowed them to coach me. I allowed them to mentor me. I allowed them to father me. And I had to get rid of that old, because I used to be one of those kids where you ain't my daddy. You can't tell me what to do. And I had somebody just flat out tell me, your daddy ain't even doing what he's supposed to do. So what are you talking about? And so I had to eat that, and it hurt. But it was my current reality, and me allowing those people like Pat Magley, Charles Martin, Apostle Jeff Wilson, Apostle Willie Coates, George McCullough, just different people that I walked through, man, Apostle Michael Patton, and I'm talking about not just through my youth, even in my adult life. I still allow people to come into my life and pour into me, especially those that see more in me than I see, because sometimes you can get caught up in the rigmarole of life, and you can just do your day-to-day and get on that rat wheel, and I have to keep people around me that challenge me, that push me, that see the greatness in me, and then hold me accountable to that greatness. And so just allowing people like that, even with my relationship with my mom is one of my biggest, and it's a lot of the stuff that I've seen her endure, and I watched her go through, and I watched her fight through it. And even though she had her ups and downs, she never quit and she never gave up. And so she instilled that fight in me, and just not giving up and laying down to what life has given you. I understand that life is not what you how you take it is how you make it. And so you can be given a hand, but it's how you play it. And I wasn't given a very good hand, but I found a way to play the hand that I was given, and I'm doing pretty good thus far.
Yeah. So, Jeermal, I believe we got our connection back. So, caller ending in last four digits of 6139. You're live with Jeermal Sylvester. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So, what's your question or comment for Mr. Jeermal?
Well, I was listening to him, and he took so many minuses and turned them into a big plus. And I think that this story will help so many of our young people, because so many times they'll take the minuses in their lives and just, live a worthless, no goals, no aims, and non-productive life. And so I really admire how he has taken things and the things that didn't come to pass in his life, and he just became a successful person. And he has a lot to offer and a lot to give. And so I'm very, very impressed, and I'm very, very proud to sit here and listen to the things that he's saying, because really it could have gone a different way. And so I'm just so happy to hear this, and I'm hoping that this story gets out to all of our young people, whether girls or boys, because this successful story can help change the lives of our children.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much for that comment. And Jeermal, it really is. It is such a inspiration to hear, and to hear it from this end, from the bottom up. And so, and really an achievement, a personal achievement. And so thank you so much for calling, and thank you for listening to Family Mix Mondays. So, Jeermal, as we are wrapping up, I do want to give you an opportunity to tell Source Nation about some strategies or resources that they can actually do or go and get that will help increase that involvement with our youth.
One thing is definitely find out what parent groups are going on at your child's respective schools. Get linked up in those groups, whether you know what's going on or not. I think that if you just surround yourself or put yourself in those environments, you'll accidentally on purpose get what you're supposed to get. And so I think just, putting yourself in those environments and allowing yourself to become privy to that information and putting yourself around other concerned parents, other parents who may not know what to do, because you're not by yourself. There's no perfect parent. There wasn't a book, but I think that if we can work together and begin to take advantage of the resources that are out there, and especially those free resources, those parent-teacher conferences, show up and stand strong and stand proud for your child, and don't always jump the gun with your child, because some of us, we're not always honest. We know that our children have negative or bad behaviors, and we'll go up to the school and show out, knowing that our kid has some negative behaviors. And let's not do that, because when we do that, we reinforce that negative behavior. And so let the school know that, hey, when my child is not doing what they need to do, I'm going to be up here. And when the school is not doing what they need to do, I'm going to be up here, so that the child and the school understands that you're there for your child's best interest, good or bad, and you're not going to allow for anyone to railroad them or treat them in a way that's less than what they should be treated. Also, Google. I stay on YouTube looking up videos, and, I just put in search words, parenting, how to be a better parent. It's nothing wrong with saying that you don't know. How would you know if you don't first admit that you don't know, and then ask questions and try to find out what it is that you need to know in order to be the best parent that you can be?
Yeah, I agree. Those have been some really great tips, and I really hope that our Source Nation will listen and actually follow through with those. And so as we wrap up, I don't want the night to end without them having the opportunity to follow up with you, join in on some of the projects you're doing, and just whatever they have for you. So would you give out any information that you have so they can get in touch with you?
Yes, I will. Currently, I'm the out-of-school youth program manager, and I'm the Project Indy Summer Employment Program Manager here in Marion County in Indianapolis, Indiana. We have a summer project coming up. We're looking to hire 2,000 young people, so if you live in the Indianapolis area, or if you know anyone in that area, and you have a young person between the ages of 16 to 24, have them sign up at projectindy.net. And they can create a profile, and as they create that profile and they put in their area code or zip code, all of the jobs within their zip code will populate. On the other side, with my motivational speaking and those things, you can reach me at mistermetoo2016@gmail.com. That's mistermetoo2016@gmail.com. Also, if you want to go look a little further, I have a website that I just put together. It's at mistermetoo.weebly.com, and you can go in and you can check on some of the other things that I've done. I facilitate, I do workshops, but more importantly, I'm always willing to get in front of a group of our young people to not only share my story, but kind of embrace them and embrace their greatness and try to help them get hyped. And that's an acronym that I created, and HYPE stands for Helping Youth Pursue Excellence Daily.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being on Family Mix Mondays, and your testimonies were awesome and heartfelt. And so I wish you so much success. And I'll definitely make sure that I can find a space back to have you back on to share some more light so that we can really break a lot of cycles that are happening within our homes and our school systems. And so thank you again for coming on, and have a good night.
Thank you. You do the same.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So Source Nation, bye-bye. So Source Nation, that was Jeermal Sylvester, and he made some really great points. And real quickly, I'll just go over some of the highlights that I really just feel are necessities for just repeating. Accountability, the time you spend with your child, being intentional about it, really realizing that your role on or off the classroom does play a difference, and not letting a lot of the talk of being misdiagnosed just be swung around, actually getting involved with your child so you can know exactly what's happened, and just really paying close attention to his story. Here's a young man that was able to come from where people would follow in as the statistic for failure is actually doing a great job in society, and decided to now pour that back into our youth. So he is just well thanked. And so I definitely, Source Nation, wanted to encourage you to follow up with him, follow him on sites, and if you have people in that area, definitely send some of your youth to be mentored by him. And so as we wrap up, I want to stop to thank our sponsors, and they are WGLRO.com, Scott Cares Foundation, Urban Grandstand Digital, Meet My Types Matchmaking, Billion to Billion Juice Bar Boutique, Renovations, and New Covenant Praise Worship Center. And as always, I want to extend myself to be reached at JABRYANT1913 @gmail.com. Twitter is at Jaketra B. My website is www.b3mentalperformances.com, and I can always be reached. And as always, if you have a quote or a poem, still waiting on some of those to come in, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email and yours might get read. And so the one I have for tonight that I felt spoke volumes to the series is called I Am the Person I Am Today because of all the people who have shaped me in every way. And that's by Nicole C. Anderson. And so thank you for listening to Family Mix Mondays. And I'm your host, Jaketra Bryant.
Yo.